All right, everybody, welcome. I'm sure we'll get some folks that are still going to be coming on in, but we are going to go ahead and begin. We've got a great webinar ahead for you from HireClicks, brought to you by Talent Board. HireClicks is also a generous supporter of Talent Board and the Candidate Experience Awards, and we appreciate that. They're going to be talking about finding candidates where you least expect it. And before I introduce our main presenter, a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar and we will make it available to you all tomorrow along with the slides. And that'll be coming tomorrow. And then if you've got questions for Neil Costa, who's our main presenter, throughout this webinar, we'll take them probably at the end for sure, but make sure to post them at any time. And you can do it in the chat function and or the question and answer function in the Zoom dashboard. So without further ado, I want to introduce the CEO and founder of HireClicks, Neil Costa. And super excited to have him. Again, HireClicks has been a big partner and supporter of ours for a few years now, and we look forward to this webinar. Neil, it is all yours, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Hopefully, everybody's doing well and hanging in there, depending on what your state is, how your state is regulating your life. Just to give you a little bit of background, I started HireClicks about 10 years ago, April 1st, 2010. So we are celebrating our 10 years as a company at this stage, which is kind of cool. But I've been in the e-commerce and digital marketing space since 1996, which is a long time at this stage. And, but moved over into the talent acquisition space by working at Monster here locally, and, working on driving candidates back to monster.com. And really after doing that, that's when I felt like there was an opportunity to bring a consumer marketing mindset directly to the TA team. Why leave all that, knowledge at the job board? Let's actually bring it right to TA teams. And so we started a recruitment marketing agency, and we've been at it for 10 years. We've got about 40 people. We're based just outside of Boston in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and really excited to, despite the circumstances in the marketplace, we've got a lot of different customers dealing with different things. So looking forward to talking about this with you because this is kind of near and dear to my heart. When we talk about finding candidates at Monster, the idea was to try and capture someone, when they were at any moment in time, depending on whatever site they were on, and get them to think about their job search. And so when we talk about finding candidates, there's obviously places that we help our clients spend their money that are job boards like LinkedIn and Glassdoor and Indeed and niche job boards and all that kind of good stuff. But some of the most exciting campaigns that we have are related to, figuring out the other sources that we can get to. How can we help a client think about ways to find candidates before they get to the job board, so we can go to the things that aren't obvious and give them a competitive advantage when it comes to attracting talent. So that's really what we're talking about. I mean, we don't have clients that are spending 100% of their dollars on non-job boards or consumer marketing sites, but we certainly like to have a percentage of the overall budget focused on tackling, how do we reach candidates? How do we engage candidates on sites that are non-traditional? So with that being said, we're going to walk through, why do we do this? Why should we actually, look at finding candidates beyond job boards? And, the number one thing is that it's just a bigger pond. We've got, massive opportunity out in the marketplace. And I think that if job boards and other folks can attract people to their properties to then resell that traffic back to you, we think with the strong message and the right targeting and a thoughtful campaign, we think that opportunity sits in your lap as well. We think that based on the kind of a brand that you have and like I said, the structure of the campaign, it can really make all the difference in trying to reach these candidates. So the bigger pond is certainly part of it. But what are some of the other reasons? People spend more time on consumer sites than they do on job board sites. When I was looking up the top 50 websites before this presentation, the only one of the job boards that I mentioned that is in that top 50 consumer websites in the US is LinkedIn. And I think that they were 26. So, the other 49 sites are places where people are, doing other things, whether they're being, on social media, whether they're researching news, whether they're checking the weather. So, in addition to there being just a bigger audience, there's people spend a lot more time there. The third thing that we think about when we're thinking about consumer marketing is just there's more opportunities to brand. If you talk about Indeed, and we spend a lot of money on Indeed and get a great ROI in most cases on Indeed, but we don't always get the opportunity to showcase our brand in ways that are creative. A lot of times we're in that scenario, you're just getting a job title and job description, and that's the advertising unit that's the currency on Indeed. And then the last part that I think is really interesting is that everybody, we talk to, whether it's a job board, whether it's a client's career site, generally about 50% of all traffic is coming from mobile devices. So if someone's on their mobile device, they're not always ready to do a full apply. And so if they're not always ready to do a full apply, then, let's go out and engage on consumer marketing sites if we have someone who's open to capturing more of a lead for a candidate that will end up sitting in a talent pool or in a CRM that they can then engage afterwards. So since all that mobile traffic is out there, let's go for a lighter call to action. So those are the main, core fundamental things that we're looking at as to why we want to get people more interested in testing out consumer marketing channels. So when you start thinking about it in more detail, how do I decide, where do I start? You mentioned this, top 50 sites only, they're all over the map. And the idea of starting a consumer campaign can be really overwhelming. And trying to figure out, typically with limited budget, which one do we start on in order to, we're always looking for ways to show signs of life, which advertising channels will show signs of life for our recruitment marketing needs. And, what we've tried to do is create a little bit of, showcase some of based on our experience, some of the things that we go through. And hopefully you can use some of those best practices as you think about making recruitment advertising investments. And we tried to create more of a structure for you to think about that. And so when we talk with clients about, okay, how much budget do we have? And, whether it's their planning for the next year, or whether it's planning for a specific campaign, we felt like instead of just talking about all these advertising channels, we tried to organize it in such a way that things fit along this recruitment marketing continuum. And this is something that we've talked about for a while, but on one end of the continuum, you have the far left over here, you have direct response advertising, and way over on the right, you have employer branding. And so things that you're familiar with from the job board perspective are going to be way over on the left, right? Because we put a job ad out there on Indeed, whether it's sponsored or whether it's the free listings, the organic listings. Someone clicks on that ad and they end up on the ATS or career site page, and the hope is to get them to complete an application. And so we're looking for a direct response marketing outcome. And that's a term, direct response, that you're going to, if you talk to your friends in corporate marketing, they're going to use that type of term as well. But basically we advertise with a very specific call to action in mind. And so when we talk about what clients need and how much budget they have, if you have limited budget and many, many job openings, you're probably going to have to focus most of your time and dollars on direct response campaigns, because as you start sliding further to the right and a little bit, to the further to the top right, you start looking at advertising channels that are a little bit harder to get people to convert to an application on. And typically the price tends to go up a little bit. And so we've added kind of we've added some estimates. Sorry if that bounced around a bit. We've added some general estimates. These are based on experience and campaigns across the last couple of years and what we typically see. But for these advertising channels, you're going to see the cost go up the more opportunities that you have for branding. So when we talk about adding consumer marketing to the mix, it isn't, if you have limited budget and you have and you have a lot of jobs, it's probably going to be hard to get to employer branding. That being said, we have people that, focus on employer branding campaigns because they have a new location, they have a competitor. We've seen Amazon come into many locations in many markets where people have to kick in branding campaigns in order to defend their workforce and try and keep them on board and build a good brand in the marketplace. So this continuum is something that we use to talk about, managing the overall marketing mix. How much do we have that that we need to use to drive applicants, and how much do we have to provide some air cover and build our brand in certain markets? So with that being said, with the reasons why we want to test out consumer marketing, the structure on how to think about the consumer marketing channels, when it's go time, what do you have to think about? You want to paint the right target, decide on the call to action, leverage strong creative, and never stop optimizing. And the optimizing part, that really is important to us, whether we're doing consumer marketing campaigns or whether we're doing job board marketing campaigns, whether we're doing programmatic campaigns. It really doesn't matter. You should always be actively managing you or your ad agency should always be actively managing the investments that you're making. So when we start with that first step about targeting an audience, because that pool is so big, and it's pretty rare that someone would target everyone in a market. Figuring out who to target is very important. So if you have nursing jobs, if you have warehouse jobs, if you have engineering jobs, trying to figure out the best way to target those candidates is really critical on the front end, because that's going to be part of the blueprint that helps you drive the selection of your sites and the consumer sites that you advertise on. It's going to help drive the creative that you build. It's really kind of the first step before you do anything. And here, there's just a couple things to think about, and a couple. I won't read them all out explicitly to you, but I think the most important thing is figuring out what you know about the existing staff that you have that are in the target that you're trying to reach. So if you're trying to reach salespeople or call center people or nursing people, it's pretty darn easy to ask folks what they spend time on, or put together a little survey, or when we do it more formally, we do market research based on and try and develop personas based on that research. So you'd actually be developing surveys and sending it out to the employees that are on staff now to try and get data points to figure out where can we go find people that have similar skill sets. The only other thing I would say in this particular section is related to the baseline conversion metrics. Because we're an ad agency, and even going back to my time at Monster, we really knew the nuts and bolts behind every campaign that we ran. And we've tried to bring that discipline to our existing clients that, if we're going to spend money on something, we should know what the typical cost per apply is, what the typical cost per lead is for our talent pool, and what's the cost per click even prior to that, and eventually the cost per hire. So if you don't have the baseline metrics, or you're not a metrics driven organization, we generally think that that's something that should be a focus for you as you think about consumer marketing campaigns, because just running a campaign and accomplishing a campaign without the metrics behind it makes it really hard to figure out whether it was a success or not. So that's really something that I would also emphasize, is that knowing your metrics for the particular types of campaigns, or even across all of your campaigns and your budget, is very, very important. Second, and it's related to the metrics. So what are the goals? When you're thinking about sliding to the further right of that recruitment marketing continuum and starting to use consumer marketing channels, you really have to think about what's realistic. If someone's on Instagram or someone's on Snapchat or shopping on Amazon, what can we actually expect that they will do? And for us, what we typically see is that we've either got someone who's trying to do some brand building, they're trying to get into the market, trying to get their name out there. Whether the second one is the brand reinforcement. Maybe they're already in a market, but there's a competitive situation, or they're trying to double down and expand that location. That's another way to get your name out there, is to invest in the brand in that particular market. And then lastly, Are we trying to capture leads? And we think that when someone is on a consumer marketing site, we think that is a very possible way to get their attention, is to, effectively leave business card information on a landing page. And that way you can have a recruiter or your CRM system can kick in and engage with those candidates afterwards. We do see applicants come out of these campaigns. It's just that the cost is typically higher. It's hard for them to have a resume ready to go. So we would, in a particular campaign, we might run it and have creative that is, where we're doing an A/B test, and half of the campaign we're sending people back to a landing page for light lead capture, and then the other half of the campaign we might send people back to a full apply and measure and see how each of those elements of the A/B test work over time. So that's certainly something that we do see applicants, but it's a little bit tougher to earn those applications when you're coming from consumer marketing sites. One of the bigger things that I think is really important as it relates to the campaigns is what creative you do. We have a motto on our creative team here that there's a lot of really lousy creative in recruitment marketing, and it doesn't have to be that way. And it doesn't really matter whether you want to do the work in-house, if you have people on your corporate marketing team available, or whether you work with an agency, or whether you work with an independent designer, or just a one-man shop, or one-man or one-woman shop contractor to help you with your creative. It doesn't matter how you get it done, but you really should put the time in to make thoughtful creative. And that's important because it's really the vehicle that you have to communicate what your brand is about, what your jobs are about, what your career path is about, out to those job seekers. And, it definitely takes more than one ad impression to earn someone's trust and to get them to click onto your site and get to know your brand. And really your creative that you put out there is the best chance that you have to get them to click on it. So, from my perspective, it's something that as an industry, I think we really need to work on a lot. And like I said, I don't think it doesn't matter how you get there. And but I think that it's certainly something that you really need to invest in and make sure that you have a good game plan around. Because I think that we've seen a lot of people waste dollars on their advertising campaigns, that they've made the investments in the media, but they haven't made the investments in the creative. And that's, it's really a recipe for a failed attempt at a campaign. So, if you're thinking that creative matters and you're on board with that, again, it needs to be good. It needs to be authentic. It doesn't have to be, a masterpiece of art by any means. It just should be true to your brand. It should give you, even little things like using stock photo versus using, authentic photos. It's always hard to get, pictures of your team because you have to get waivers and things like that. But, we found over time that, the authentic pictures actually, work better, because at this stage you can actually tell, what is a stock photo and what isn't a stock photo. We actually have access to a little tool that lets us do, if we upload a picture to it, we can actually check and see how many times it's used around the internet. So we when we do a brand audit for someone, we can look at that. Or when we look at a client's competitive sites, we'll take a look at that as well. So, we think that authenticity is absolutely critical when it comes to building out the creative. And sometimes it just seems overwhelming, right? Everybody has a day job, and if they're trying to manage a rec load and, be the admin on your ATS or pick a new CRM and implement it, it can be kind of daunting to figure out, how to execute on creative. It's not typically in your wheelhouse. And even if you have a recruitment marketing team or person that does that, sometimes they're not always given the resources to be successful. So for us, some of the quick things or important things to hit that we've seen, drive a little bit more success than not are, checking with your in-house team first. If they do have bandwidth, they're the ones that know your corporate brand the best. And, when you're building out consumer marketing campaigns or recruitment campaigns, you shouldn't be reinventing your brand. It should be, it's part of your corporate brand family. So how does it fit in there? And I think that that's really important to, check with your in-house team first. If they don't have bandwidth, then you want to ask permission to work with someone on the outside. Hopefully someone that maybe has worked for them as a contractor, or, as you get to know an agency, they tend to good agencies will make smart investments in understanding your company and your brand in order to be able to execute on good creative. Most companies have brand standards. If you don't have them, then that's a challenge. So what that means is, what font is the right font to use in the brand? How do you use the logo? Certainly when you're working with the corporate marketing people, they're going to know that, the logo should be a certain distance away from, other letters or other marks or other terms, or, certain typesets are used in documents. So you really want to make sure that it's a simple question to ask about the brand standards, and you want to, again, keep it so it looks like the creative is from the same company. And by getting the brand standards document, usually it could be online, could be a PDF, whatever it is, it's something that's really critical to ask about. So that way you can make sure that you're building creative that falls in line with the family. I typically also say stay simple on the ad sizes. There are typically 3 big ad sizes, and you probably recognize them if you went to a consumer website, but there's a 300 by 250 square, and the metric, the 300 by 250 is the number of pixels. And, so there's a 300 by 250, a 160 by 600, and a 728 by 90. 728 by 90 is like a leaderboard at the top of a page. And, I'm showing you with my hands because I don't have a screenshot of it. And, but basically, when you go and look at consumer advertising channels, they'll give you a list of like, here are the ad sizes that are possible. And it could sometimes be 10, 15, 20 different ad sizes. And, if you're paying for that and people are creating those ad sizes for you, it costs money every time they create a different ad size. So those 3 ad sizes are the most common that you're going to find on pretty much any website out there, because all the different ad sizes are governed by a standards board, and I can make sure that we add those 3 sizes into the document. But don't go crazy. Don't create 10 different sized ads for a campaign. You really want to focus on the big 3. So once you have your target painted, you decide on your call to action, and you've got your creative set, how do you activate a campaign? And so the way that we try and think about campaigns in the consumer world is really breaking it down into 4 buckets. These are major buckets that, we'll dig into it a little bit more, but, consumer ads for social media, consumer ads for content related sites, consumer ads for shopping, and consumer ads for music. So these are the categories that we've been using most as of late when we roll out campaigns. And to give you a more detailed look at what does that mean, we're looking at our media options. These are the types of sites that we're doing those campaigns on. So the social media paid is we're doing a lot of Facebook, Instagram. We've started to do more Snapchat. We haven't got to TikTok yet. If you've got, teenagers, you probably know what that is, but probably don't know what that is at the same time. And, we're basically, we're running out campaigns on these channels in a pretty consistent basis, especially Facebook. And I think that we've found a lot of opportunities to drive applicants and interest and, all the different calls to action we talked about. So, some people do what I would consider a social media, organic campaign. If you're really good at posting content, then maybe you don't have to use a paid campaign, but we're trying to do a little bit of both. Make sure we have good, strong content on the destination page on one of these sites. And then we're also targeting users of the sites as well through the advertising tools. Second, these are what I would consider consumer ad campaigns focused on content related sites. So, these are just a couple examples. The roster of sites that we're targeting from a content perspective, literally hundreds of items in those lists. But some of these in particular right now with CNN and Fox News and Time, there's just so much happening in the world that we've found that trying to target news sites in particular is really critical. And if you want to take a different slice on that and focus on promoting finance, if you're in the finance space and you want to focus on rolling out campaigns to Wall Street Journal, that's certainly an opportunity as well. One of the challenges that we have when we're looking at some of these campaigns, well, there's a challenge on like these big sites typically require minimums of $10,000-$20,000 just to start, and we'll talk about a way to get around that and still activate campaigns a little bit in a couple slides. Consumer ads in the shopping space. So we've become a Amazon partner, and we think Amazon is a place where people are spending a ton of time. And they've recently allowed us to promote products, promote advertising on the site that's not related to products in the marketplace. So that's actually been something that's been pretty interesting and relatively new for HireClicks clients. And then lastly, consumer ads. We're seeing a lot of success. In the past, we've done some regular terrestrial radio ads, but we think the Spotify and Pandora options are certainly giving us lots of opportunities. And in many cases, we've tested both. We've done terrestrial radio against Spotify and Pandora, and we've seen a lot of success on the Spotify side, especially. So these are the kind of categories and the buckets that those campaigns are falling in now. When it comes to consumer advertising and targeting the news sites, this is just an example of the sites that we typically reach when we're leveraging, what we call programmatic plus. So since we're not typically going to Time or CNN and buying ads directly, we're leveraging a programmatic platform to buy ads on these consumer sites. And those consumer sites are, what I consider major media properties like you have listed here. But then over on the right, you can see a couple mobile ads related to, the LA Times or Mashable. So this programmatic plus platform allows us to go in and actually really target local properties in addition to, really specific niche properties like Mashable. So something we're really excited about. And I think that when we're working with a client who knows that audience that they're going after, and if they're a really, technical audience, or, we've got a client that's always recruiting mechanics and truck drivers, and, we can really focus on people that are into, the kind of the gearhead world and things like that by using consumer marketing campaigns. Amazon, as I mentioned, is a channel that we've activated. We activated at the end of last year. And, in this particular example, what we're trying to do is, again, we're introducing recruitment ads in a space where there really aren't recruitment ads. Amazon had typically only allowed promotion of items in their overall marketplace. And we were able to get into a program with them where we can actually leverage advertising campaigns and drive them off of Amazon. So for us, the example that kind of brought this to life a little bit as we talked with our team, as we start to talk with clients, is that, we can go and search for nurse scrubs on Amazon and put a nurse recruiting ad on that same page. So that's something that we've started to do more and more. And again, the opportunity is there because it's it's someplace that people are spending a lot of time, and because it's still early for recruitment ads on Amazon, we've seen some really good click-through rates and cost per click numbers and things along those lines. So as we talk about all those different options and where you can advertise and how you can advertise, I figured it would be helpful for people to get a sense of, if I have X amount of dollars, what should I do with it? And if I'm interested in consumer marketing and I have a certain budget, what's the best way to go about, starting something? So I just created these buckets where you guys could hopefully take some of it and utilize it, or just give you some sort of guidelines so that way you're not, trying to overdo it or boil the ocean and try and get too much done with a modest budget. And the toe dipper budget, if you had $1,000 to spend, you really want to pick like one consumer marketing channel, and you probably want to keep it to something like Facebook. It's really easy to turn on. There's still lots of advertising inventory there because people spend a lot of time there, and you really want to just focus on one location with a couple of jobs, or a certain site that has maybe many jobs, and just push people back to some sort of landing page, so that way they can connect with your brand and become a prospect for your recruiting team to follow up with. At $5,000, I feel like that's a number that, if people have $5,000 to spend on a consumer marketing campaign, I feel like that's a good solid test. You're probably not going to drive a ton of, straight up applicants, but you're going to get a good read on, whether one or two advertising channels are actually a good fit for you. So pick a couple locations or pick one location and, try two different advertising channels. And, at the end of it, after you run that campaign for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, somewhere in that range, I think you're going to get a sense of like, hey, Instagram works for us, Amazon doesn't work for us. So I think there's enough data there for you to figure out, is there a sign of life? And then does that give you the wherewithal to go back and try and get more budget to, double down and invest in the channel that showed you a sign of life? Or, did they not work? And, you have to figure out, as part of, is it the channel, is it the creative, is it the job that we used for that particular campaign, or, the message that we used for that particular campaign, and was it successful or not? I think in the next bucket up, the impactful campaign, this is where you could definitely start digging into 3 or 4 different advertising channels. And it's just a far more robust test of the consumer marketing channels that you can use. I would still not go crazy. Like, I don't think you could do like a national campaign for $25,000. You really still want to have a sense of like, concentrating the call to action to a certain location or a certain segment of jobs. If you have field sales jobs, if you have engineering jobs or retail managers or something like that, you want to keep it the target of who you're trying to attract or where you're trying to attract people from pretty tight still. And then lastly, if you've got $100,000 to, now you're talking about what I would consider a pretty significant brand push. We've got 5 to 10 channels is what's possible. You can definitely work across a multi-state region and get a lot of interest in that regard. You could, I think you can learn a lot, you can execute a lot. You should expect to see significant bumps in, either leads in your CRM or certainly career site traffic around the places that you're using or that you're trying to promote through that campaign. So let's just kind of figured I'd package up some options there. With that being said, this is data from a very recent campaign. It's actually still active right now, where a client was trying to make a push across 4 different states and, felt like they really wanted to get the message out that they're still hiring. And, they have a core baseline budget that they spend on Indeed sponsored jobs and other media channels. But they basically went back to the well and felt like, maybe not everyone's thinking that we're an employer that's still hiring, and we want to go and create some buzz around that. So what you see here is, we used 8 different advertising channels, and those 8 different advertising channels, allowed for us to get a sense of what's working and what's not working. And in the blue columns on the left, what you have there is the cost per click for each of the advertising channels. And the red column is more of the is the CPM. And if you're not familiar with it, advertising is typically measured in a CPM. The M stands for the Roman numeral for 1,000. So the cost to reach 1,000 impressions on an advertising channel. And so if you're looking at advertising in newspapers, magazines, television, and any other media site, CPM is a metric that you'll hear a lot. But as we've moved to more of a performance marketing world, a direct response marketing world, we really look at cost per click quite a bit. And so that's actually where the blue column is cost per click, the red column is the CPM, the cost per 1,000 impressions. You'll see here that, some of the media channels are providing a really efficient cost per click and a cost per 1,000. I think anything under $10 from a CPM perspective is really good. And I think that, if you look at Indeed brand, it really stands out as an expensive cost per 1,000. And Indeed is, it's typically a job search site, and they have this new ad unit. If you haven't used it yet, it's called ITA, or Indeed Targeted Ad -brand. And so that's what this particular campaign is using. And the CPM is high because Indeed knows that everybody on their site really has an intent to find a job, whereas the site, the other sites and the other CPMs are relatively low because they fall more in line of what it costs to buy inventory for specific audiences. So The ITA brand ad unit is very expensive from an impression perspective, how many times it's shown. But you can see, because of the low cost per click, the $1.49 a click, it actually becomes very efficient when it comes to getting someone to follow that call to action. And the different thing about Indeed brand, our ITA brand, is that you don't have to send them to the direct job. Indeed sponsored ads or the organic job ads, you're going to get people to go right back to that specific job description, and they're going to have to apply at that stage. With ITA brand, you can actually send people to either your Indeed company page or a different landing page. So it's really an interesting ad unit, and shows the even though the inventory is expensive, it's basically a pretty efficient click to get someone to go on that and check out that call to action. So again, just wanted to give you some examples, some sense of like, what does it look like when you actually run these campaigns? And if you're looking at Glassdoor jobs as another kind of typical job board channel, the CPM's high, but just like the Indeed site performance, you see the cost per click is relatively efficient. That being said, with things like Facebook and things like Google AdWords, and we're getting people to come back to a career site or come back to a landing page with a pretty efficient cost per click. Even if you slide over to the Amazon ads and YouTube ads, now you're starting to get up into areas that are pretty expensive. But AdWords in this particular case at 90 cents is actually relatively cheap. I usually see at Google AdWords at a pretty high dollar amount, because what happens on Google AdWords, and I think it's the nature of the market that we're in right now, because less people are advertising, that Google AdWords competitive marketplace to advertise is slower. So it's become more cost effective to do that. We typically see Google AdWords, in the $3, $4, $5, $6 per click. And the reason why is that if you decide to build out a Google AdWords campaign to promote your jobs or promote your career site, you're really competing against all the staffing firms. You're competing against all the job boards who are typically spending money on those job search terms. And but right now, a lot of those folks have pulled back on their spend because of the marketplace that we're in. So hopefully that's some helpful benchmarking that you can take a look at. So one of the other things that I wanted to just throw out there, and I know that so much that Kevin and Ron work on and the talent board works on is, the candidate experience. And, we think it's critical. Like, once you advertise and you send someone back to the site, what is their experience from there? So that's really, it's important to focus on that. But I think that in particular, when you're advertising on consumer sites, you have to think about, we're reaching out to these people and engaging with them on the sites that they like and that they care about. So how do we go to them and engage with them on their terms? And that is part of the candidate experience. How do we create, something that catches their attention, that grabs their eye and draws them back in to get to know us? That's really what we're trying to, when we talk with clients about consumer marketing campaigns, it's not always the hard applicant that we're going to get. It's going to be someone who we built something that was targeted. We went into their environment where they're doing, recreational news research, maybe, checking their stock portfolio, and we're trying to get their attention. So for me, I think it's just an extension of, it's a preamble to what happens when they get on the career site. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is kind of go out to them and start the candidate experience on a non-traditional site compared to your job boards. So just a little thought there. And then, major takeaways for recruitment marketing for consumer marketing campaigns. You really want to think about this because you want to diversify your recruitment marketing budget overall. It's critical to define your targets. Absolutely critical to define what you want them to do from an call to action perspective. I think you're going to get like a greater reach, like we talked about. Certain candidates don't go to job boards as often as you would hope. So how do we go to them and engage with them in their environment? And then the other takeaway, it's worth saying explicitly, I think, is that you should always be a good partner to corporate marketing and corporate branding. It's not always easy, but I think that that's really important to the success of a consumer marketing driven campaign. And then don't underestimate the power of investing in your employer brand. in advertising, there's some theories about, how many different touches it takes for your brand to make an impact on someone. So I think that, this is really important air cover to help your recruiters do their jobs. And, sometimes it's come up in campaigns where we have like a VP of sales or a director of engineering who's like, oh my God, I saw our recruitment ads on, this site. I saw it on, Mashable, or I saw your ads on, Wall Street Journal. And I think that that's actually one that means you're targeting the right people. And, secondly, I think that it shows that, you can win, get some victories internally. And I think it's always important to, invest in your employer brand, and I think one of the things that right now at this moment in time, we do see people retreating, right? We see people getting conservative and not spending money, and that's totally understandable in most cases. But if you have the opportunity, down markets are often a time to gain market share, to show strength, and to, build your brand up. So, if you think it's not the right time, it's something that you should really, look at and see if it's something you can roll up your sleeves and dig into at this time to gain a little bit of market share. So hopefully that's helpful. Kevin, I don't know if you want to take it back over from here.
Neil, thank you so much. That was great. Folks, if you got questions for Neil, you can post them in the chat or the Q&A part of the Zoom dashboard. And Neil, to start things off, there's a lot of great information. It's for somebody, whether they're a smaller team or even a larger team that maybe doesn't have a lot of marketing experience. And I'll get to the whole point about, trying to partner better with corporate marketing, which sometimes companies can find resistance to. But just what do we do first? I mean, like, I love what you're saying here, that I should be thinking like a true consumer marketer. And this was a great opportunity for me to go out and better target and find candidates, especially those that I want to convert and to potentially hire. What's one thing I should do today? I've never done anything like this before at my organization.
Yeah, I think that it's probably hardest to find the budget for it. How do I justify this? Mm-hmm. And anytime you're trying to justify budget, I mean, I started my career back in finance way a long time ago. And I think it's really, you've got to build a business case for why you want to do this.
Sure.
And the business case has to be very low risk, so if you're going to do something and we always talk with our team about how can we help the client explain this to their CFO?
Yes.
And so, I think building a business case is the first thing you really need to do. And, you probably want to start in the $1,000 or $5,000 range and say, listen, we think that our engineers, the engineers we're targeting are on, these types of sites. And so we want to go out and try that. Again, I think that people typically I want to spend $3,000 or $25,000 on ZipRecruiter or Indeed or LinkedIn. But to go out and try and find, using some of the points in the slides, we're trying to find people that other companies aren't going to find by going to the consumer sites. So I think you have to build a conservative business case. I think you have to set the expectation that we've never done this before. It may work, it may fail. So I think that, building the business case, using some of the reasons why you want to reach out to talent in a different environment, and setting the expectation that this could work or it might not work, and I think that being clear about it versus being, I don't know, maybe I'm just being conservative, but I wouldn't over promise. I'd rather under promise and over deliver.
Oh, of course. I mean, yeah, I completely agree on that. The ability to be able to better target right now, especially since some economies are starting to open up a little bit. It's going to be fits and starts. Companies are starting to think about hiring in the next few months, if not now, 3, 6, 9, 12 months, and what that looks like. At the end of the day, to make that business case, as you were saying, to them and to be willing to actually make that investment. I mean, we know because my background's marketing, right? I know that at times like this, anytime there's a downturn for whatever reason, .com bust, mortgage
Mhm.
crisis, pandemic, you can go back and list them all. Still trying to remain a little bit bullish and make those investments on the marketing side can actually give you a competitive edge at the end of the day, right? Considering that most companies always put on full brakes, freeze hiring. We're not doing anything at all. We're not communicating with candidates. We're turning everything off. But this is an opportunity, even just for pipelining right now, right? Even if you're not hiring. So, what else? How would you expand on that? Because that could be part of the business case, right? That's been
Yeah,
made.
I think that when you mentioned, pipelining is really important right now. I think there's two parts. One, we think the bounce back is what we're calling it, and how we're preparing people is like, how do we prepare for the bounce back,
Right.
right? I think that there's going to be people who decide to go right back to the job that they left or were asked to leave, but we also think there's opportunities for switching. And so, how do we put out air cover there to get people's mind share that when they actually do go back to the workforce, that they come join us? So that's part of our recommendation right now, is that let's get ahead of it and let's put advertising dollars into the market, for the bounce back, whether they're branding dollars or whether they're pipelining dollars.
Right.
And that's really, we're the good news is we did a customer roundtable with about 30 clients, a couple weeks ago, and I'll tell you, there was way more optimism than I expected. There's way more people that are still advertising, hiring, figuring out virtual onboarding, and so it was actually a pretty positive thing to be a part of. And so it made us, even more bullish on trying to prepare for the bounce back. And when you mention pipelining, I think that is a key metric, because for these consumer marketing channels, again, we're looking for very simple landing page based information. We're looking for 4 fields: name, phone number, area of interest, things like that. So we want to try and focus on lead capture for pipelining, and then just give the recruiters, that gives them an edge to call someone.
Right.
So I think that pipelining is really important right now, versus sitting on your hands and kind of waiting until you're absolutely sure that the market is coming back.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be playing from behind.
Right. Right. Exactly. And you're going to have, again, it doesn't even have to be direct competitors to you either, right? It could be, I mean, if you may be a healthcare organization that's competing for tech talent for, the big four organizations, the Facebooks, the Googles, whatever the case is. I know a healthcare organization in Florida that we've worked with that competes with Disney,
Yeah.
on a lot of administrative positions too.
Well,
So
it's even like I don't know if you saw the CVS program, where they were basically bringing people in from Hilton and Marriott to work in their retail stores or work in their pharmacies. So it was a collaborative thing where, people in the hospitality industry were hit the hardest, and CVS said, "Hey, why don't you think of a career over here?" But that's a big switch, right?
right,
And I
definitely
think that's, will all of those, when hospitality bounces back, will all of those people go back to hospitality? Like, I don't know, but CVS has certainly created an opportunity for themselves to earn, loyalty and new employees, taking a big, what would in a normal market be a really big risk.
agreed, absolutely. And well, you've also got a lot of individuals, hourly workers in the services industry that are a big part of that unemployment number right now, that are surging in applications for other organizations too. But they should definitely be considered, especially from a candidate experience perspective. The one thing I always ask when we're doing our Candy, which is candidate experience for short, Candy workshops and other events where I've got talent acquisition leaders and their teams in the room, and we're talking about employment branding, and we're talking about if you haven't done so yet, reach across the organization and talk to your corporate marketing folks. Try to better partner and align the corporate brand with the employer brand, and have them be a champion and help you to market your positions that you're hiring for and the type of people that you're looking for. Any recommendations, those, because there's always some in the room that raise their hand and say, you know what, corporate doesn't want to have anything to do with us at
Yeah.
all. Do you have any recommendations for those that are really trying to break through so they can better partner with them?
Yeah, I think that so having been at a couple, companies that have a strong brand and been in that environment, I mean, chances are they're focused on generating sales and leads for the business, right? They really 95% of the time they do not have the bandwidth to help you. So it's really about, but they are just as concerned about someone really messing up the brand or screwing
Right.
up, because they're going to get called out on it. So I think that you have to be just very communicative and explicit in how and what you want to do. And that's why I mentioned like asking permission to work with an outside contractor. And in a lot of cases, they'll have a portfolio of those contractors that they're comfortable with. So I
Right.
think that that could be, listen, going to it with like, I know you probably don't have the bandwidth, but I'd love to get the corporate brand standards and I'd love to get a list of any contractors you worked with in the past. And I think that that's going to give, they just don't want to, there's no upside for someone going rogue with the brand for the corporate marketing people. So you've just got to be understanding of their situation and understanding of, the situation they're in. So, and I think whenever we go into an account with a new client, we always ask for that meeting to be set up so we can show them that like, we're, basically saying we understand that you are the governors of the brand and we agree to abide by the brand standards. And it's really just to get them comfortable. And, beyond that, just having a really inclusive workflow. Like, hey, once we get something done, we're going to show you in corporate marketing, this many days before we go live.
Got
So
it.
I think those couple things that asking for the brand standards, asking for vendors they're comfortable with, and then, if you do get a new vendor, like a new ad agency, just making sure that we always see it as just a nice way to facilitate a conversation, because I think a lot of our TA clients often don't know what to ask for.
Right.
So, I think we can help, but if they set up the call, we can help navigate that. And we typically get those corporate marketing folks really comfortable in a really short time frame.
Good. That's important because if that doesn't work, then Zoom bombing. So
Right.
jump
Exactly.
in on those marketing meetings and just start take over the whiteboard.
Exactly.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. So, Ron, I've got Ron Mockmer, my global program manager for Talent Board. Ron, do we have a question?
Yes, great presentation today, Neil, and thank you guys both for this discussion. We did have one question that has come in. It was asking if any campaigns come to mind that you had initially were scratching your head, wondering if it would be money well spent, but worked really well in the end.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm super skeptical of the Snapchat campaign that was on the slide. I just have a very different perception of Snapchat and what it's useful for. But the engagement is a swipe, right? That you're interested in this particular brand, and
Mm,
so we've seen that work really well. And again, the client's goal was to get out there, and I think that getting out there in a demographic that they haven't been able to reach in the past. So, the call to action wasn't as important there aside from just having a brand engagement. So, Snapchat is something that has definitely surprised me. I mean, I think the Amazon ads for me have been very positively received by
mm,
customers, and the cost per click and cost per impression has been more reasonable than I expected. So, and again, some of that is just making sure that you do the right targeting. If you just leave, if in these consumer channels, if you just leave the targeting like wide open, you're going to get clicks from other countries. You're going to
right.
get clicks from all over the place. You've got to be. So I think when we onboard a client that wants to do an Amazon campaign, you've just got to be very specific about what they're looking for. And I think managing the geography that a campaign is running in is critical to being efficient as well.
Got
I
it.
mean, I think for most people, geography is still pretty important to the job. Maybe that'll all
Yes.
change because of this, but I think that it's making sure you're conservative in how you target the geography will help something like Amazon pay off better than we expected.
Got it. So Neil, we're just about done, and I've got one more really quick question. You at the
Yeah.
end you touched on in candidate experience, and I just wanted to ask you one more thing about that. I always talk about this when I'm talking about technology as well, but from the candidate's perspective, right? They don't care what your marketing campaigns are. They don't care if you're using programmatic advertising. They don't care what the technology stack is, right? All we care about as candidates is, am I, am I finding some jobs that I'm interested in that I want to apply to, and employers I may want to work for? Am I being communicated with throughout the process? And if I'm given closure, if you're not going to pursue me anymore, whether it's right after I apply, if I'm not qualified at all, or if I make it to final stages and you let me know. So with all this work that you've been talking about in this webinar, what is one thing that companies need to keep in mind throughout as it relates to candidate experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at whatever touch point that you have with a candidate, it's you've got to be a really good caretaker along the way, because one bad move with the wrong person could just lead to negative reviews, negative comments, and it's at whatever stage, whether it's how you engage with them from a creative perspective on a consumer site, or yeah, the responses that they get after they get through the application process. I mean, I think that you've got to be mindful that everything you do is under a microscope, and I think that not enough people go through and kind of test everything themselves. Like we do a lot of like you know walking through something like we're the candidate, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
trying to go through that. And I think that that's just good testing of any system.
Yep.
And advertising and marketing and recruiting is all just a system, right? And so the more that you can go through that and test it as if you're role playing the candidate side, then I think that's when you start to find things like, well, that just doesn't feel right, or that doesn't
Right.
sound right. So I think that it doesn't have to be the director or VP at TA, but someone should be the voice of the candidate, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of say, I went through this the other day and it just feels backwards, or that doesn't feel like our brand. So I think that's
Exactly.
experiencing things like the candidate is the most important thing, I would say.
Agreed. Totally. And we totally recommend that to any employer is again, walk in the candidate shoes, go through your own processes, apply for
Yeah.
your own jobs, find jobs online and follow that trail if with advertising. Well, Neil, thank you so much again for being
Thank
on.
you.
We're about out of time. So we want to thank everybody for attending today. And again, we will make this recording and the slides available tomorrow for you all. And Neil, thank you again. And Ron, thanks as well.
Thank you so much.
All
Appreciate it,
right.
Kevin. Thank you, Ron.
Bye-bye
Thanks,
now.
Thanks, you
everybody.
guys. Take care, everyone.